It was a cold November weekend when it happened. The kind of weekend where the sun sets early and the sky looks bruised and gray all day long. I was 15 and spending the night at my best friend Jamie's house with two other friends, Matt and Leo. We had planned it for weeks. Junk food, horror movies, staying up all night, the usual sleepover stuff. Jamie's parents were out of town, which made it feel even better. No rules, no bedtime. Jamie lived just outside of town, in one of those big old farmhouses with creaky floorboards and narrow hallways. His nearest neighbors were across a long field and barely visible through the skeletal trees. The house was over 100 years old, the kind of place that always feels cold, no matter how high you turn the heat. We all gathered in the living room around 6 p.m., hauling sleeping bags, chips, and energy drinks. The fireplace crackled softly, while horror movies played back to back. It started off fun. We laughed at the bad acting, jumped at the cheap scares, and tried to freak each other out with made-up ghost stories. But something about that house already made my skin itch. Every door seemed to close just a little too slowly. The basement door groaned in the dark hallway, even when untouched. At around 1 a.m., Matt dared us to explore the attic. Jamie protested at first. "My parents don't like anyone going up there," he said. "They say it's dangerous, weak floorboards and rats." But of course, the more he said no, the more we wanted to do it. We made our way up the narrow staircase, flashlight beams shaking with excitement. The attic door was warped, sticking in its frame. It took all four of us pushing before it opened, with a dry screech, like it hadn't been used in years. The air changed immediately, cold and musty, filled with the sharp smell of mold and old wood. The attic was enormous and cluttered. Boxes, old furniture, broken picture frames. Everything was covered in a thick layer of dust. A single window on the far side let in a sliver of moonlight, just enough to give shape to the mess. We poked around for a few minutes, joking until Leo found something strange. It was an old wooden chest, half rotted and tucked behind a pile of chairs. The lock was broken. Inside, we found something unexpected. Dozens of black and white photographs. All of kids, sleepovers, birthdays, holidays, normal-looking stuff at first. But then we noticed something that made our laughter die. In almost every photo, there was someone standing in the background, always blurry, always in a dark coat, always just at the edge of the frame. Sometimes they were behind curtains, other times in windows, never looking at the camera, but always present. And every photo had the same scribble on the back: "He watches when you sleep." None of us laughed after that. We quickly put the photos back and closed the chest. Jamie looked pale. "I've never seen this before," he said. "Swear to God, we left the attic fast." Once back in the living room, we tried to shake it off. Told ourselves they were probably old Halloween prank photos or something weird Jamie's parents did as kids. But none of us really believed that. Around 2:30 a.m., we all laid out our sleeping bags and tried to get some sleep. The TV was still on, quietly playing a rerun of some sitcom. But I couldn't sleep. The feeling hadn't gone away. That feeling that we weren't alone, that the house was watching. Then, around 3:10 a.m., Matt sat bolt upright in his sleeping bag and whispered, "Who's that?" We all turned. Someone was standing in the hallway, a tall, dark figure, just standing there, motionless, watching us. I couldn't breathe. Jamie reached for the flashlight, turned it on, and the hallway was empty. We all jumped up and ran to check, but there was nothing there. Doors were still locked. The hallway was silent. Still, none of us could sleep after that. We sat huddled together, lights on, waiting for morning. But the night wasn't done with us. At around 4:22 a.m., Leo screamed. We spun around to see him crawling backwards away from the window. There was a face, he whispered, shaking. looking in at me, just staring. We looked outside. The yard was dark, empty, nothing but the trees swaying in the wind. But when we looked closer, we saw something that made our stomachs drop. Footprints in the frost-covered grass just below the window, leading from the woods to the side of the house, and then nothing. No returning prints. Whoever or whatever had been watching us hadn't walked away. We called the police. When they arrived 30 minutes later, they searched the property and found nothing. No person, no tracks, not even the footprints we had clearly seen. They told us it was probably animals, maybe a prank, but none of us believed it. Not after what happened next. The next morning, after the police had left and daylight poured into the living room, we started packing up. Jamie went upstairs to get some clothes and didn't come back for a long time. When he did, he looked like he'd seen a ghost. He held up a photo. It had been placed on his bed. A brand new Polaroid of us, all four of us, sleeping in our bags just a few hours earlier. Taken from inside the house. There were no Polaroid cameras in Jamie's house. None of us had one. On the back, written in blocky, shaky letters, were the words, "We left the house that morning and never returned." Jamie's family moved out a month later. The house is still there, abandoned and slowly collapsing. Every once in a while, someone dares to go inside. Kids on dares. Urban explorers. They don't stay long. Some say they see a tall figure in the attic window watching. Some say they find old photographs scattered on the floor. And some say, if you sleep there, even for one night, you'll wake up with a picture of yourself taken while you slept. That's not the only time I've had something horrifying happen at a sleepover. Years later, I had another experience. I was in college. My roommate Dean had a cabin in the woods near a frozen lake. He invited 3 of us to come out for a weekend getaway, just like old times. It was supposed to be relaxing. Drinking, board games, hiking, no Wi-Fi, no cell reception. Just trees and silence. Everything started off fine, but on the second night, just after 1 a.m., we heard something scratching at the cabin door. We froze. It wasn't an animal. It sounded too deliberate. Dean grabbed a flashlight and opened the door. Nothing was there, but when he looked down, he found a piece of paper pinned to the door with a long, rusted nail. It said, "I remember you." None of us knew what it meant. We assumed it was a prank, some weird backwoods joke. But then we heard it again. Not scratching this time, whispers, dozens of them, coming from the trees surrounding the cabin. No matter where we pointed the flashlights, we saw nothing. But the voices kept moving, closer, circling us. Dean locked the door, and we sat in silence, weapons in hand. We didn't sleep at all that night. By morning, the woods were quiet. The snow around the cabin was undisturbed. Not a single track. But taped to every window from the outside was a different note. Each one said the same thing. We packed up and left. Dean said he never told anyone about it. But when we pressed him, he finally admitted something. That when he was a kid, he had a sleepover there. That one of his friends went missing in the woods during the night and was never found. And now, all these years later, someone or something hadn't forgotten. Sleepovers are supposed to be safe, fun, innocent. But sometimes when you gather in a strange house far from help, you're not alone. Sometimes the past follows you. Sometimes you leave the door open a crack and something walks in. Something that watches, waits, and remembers.